Hello everyone, my name is Giselle Science, and today I'll be sharing my capstone project where I mapped both the geographic patterns and lived experiences of sewage spills across Los Angeles County. My goal was to understand more than just where these spills were occurring. I wanted to know how people actually experience them and what those patterns reveal about environmental inequity in our county. My guiding research question was, how do the geographic distributions and lived experiences of sewage spills in the Los Angeles County highlight environmental inequities and identify areas most in need of remediation? This question pushed me to look at the data from multiple angles, and so I approached this project from technical, social, and emotional levels. To answer this question, I used three main methods. So first, GIS mapping using 15 years of official spill data from the State Water Board. Second, I used a bilingual survey where I collected 162 responses. With this survey, I also created a participatory map where people could drop a pin on where they believe spills are happening. And third, I also conducted expert interviews with Dr. Catherine Pease and Daryl T. Hatch, who provided invaluable insight into the infrastructure, reporting, and communication gaps that were happening throughout this work. And altogether, these methods created a polyvocal understanding of sewage spills in the Los Angeles County. So let's take a look at some of my preliminary data. So on the left, the incident density map shows where sewage spills have occurred most frequently. And on the right, the volume map displays where the largest number of gallons were released over the last 15 years in terms of sewage spills. So what immediately stands out is that many spills are reported in the southeast regions of Los Angeles, as we can see here and here around the Whittier area and Long Beach. And this connects perfectly to Laura Polito's work on how pollution patterns often concentrate in historically marginalized areas, which the eastern and southern parts of LA are known to be slightly more under-resourced. But the more surprising finding is that the most frequent and largest spills also appear in these very affluent cities. So we're talking Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, up here in Glendale as well, as we can see from both of these maps, Pasadena, and then also Palos Verdes, which are known to be a little bit more affluent, a little bit more on the wealthier side. And at first, this might suggest that wealthy areas are possibly facing some of the more environmental stress that comes with this issue. However, when we look closer at this pattern, it becomes clear that the story is not all what it may seem. It's a little bit more complicated. These hotspots may not directly reflect where the greatest harm is actually happening. Instead, they may be revealing something about perhaps differences in reporting practices or the administrative capacity of these sewage spill reports, or how consistently cities track and document their spills. The community map tells a slightly different story. So when asked where spills were most affecting them, participants overwhelmingly pointed to Santa Monica, Dockweiler, and Long Beach. We can see right here, Santa Monica. This is the Dockweiler area, and then down here in Long Beach as well, where we see that it is most concentrated. And so this revealed something important, and it's that people don't experience spills where they originate underground, right, along the pipeline systems inland. They experience them where the contamination arrives and where the beach access is suddenly lost. So we know that sewage follows the natural path of the watershed. So any spills that happen inland will naturally flow outwards into the ocean. And this is where people are most noticing them and experiencing them, and are experiencing the loss of recreational space. One major finding was just how limited public awareness is. Over 40% had zero awareness of spills in the last 15 years, and another 36% were only somewhat aware. And this makes sense as most people only hear about sewage spills when a beach gets closed. So a lot of inland communities never get the information at all about these occurrences. And so when people are not told that a spill happened, they cannot protect themselves, they cannot raise concerns, and they cannot advocate for better infrastructure. So this lack of communication becomes its own form of inequity. And then only about a quarter of participants said they or someone they knew had been directly impacted. But for those who had, their experiences were practical and everyday, including foul odors, closed beaches or parks, occasional illness, and some reports of property damage. So overall, this seems to be a consistent theme of routines being disrupted, recreation being limited, and just an overall reduction in the quality of life in these people's day-to-day routines. When it came to the topic of environmental inequity from a public perception, nearly 88% of respondents believe that certain neighborhoods are more affected than others. People connected inequity to things like aging infrastructure, lack of resources, and uneven political attention. And this reflects a public understanding that spills are tied to structural inequality and are not some kind of isolated events or accidents. And then we have the anonymous survey testimonies, which added emotional depth. Here we can see people described marine life suffering, frustration over repeated beach closures, witnessing burst manholes. Some people had health concerns, and whole summers being lost because the water was unsafe due to sewage spills. And these lived stories highlight experiences that GIS maps alone could never capture or help explain. And my expert interviews revealed two critical insights. Daryl Hatch emphasized that reporting capacity shapes the data, not just infrastructure failure. So, wealthy cities may appear as hotspots because they report consistently, while under-resourced cities may lack that capacity entirely. And Dr. Catherine Pease emphasized the topic of information inequity. She said, "So few people know about water quality. Even if there's a posted sign, many don't see it or know what it means." She also reminded me that where the source isn't necessarily where the impact is, which helped me make sense of why the coastline ends up carrying most of the visible impact that people are noticing. And when all this information is put together, a few key conclusions start to become clear. The GIS data identifies Southeast LA, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, Glendale, Pasadena, and Palos Verdes as priority areas due to high spill frequency or high spill volume. And spill hotspots in affluent areas may not be driven by reporting capacity and aging infrastructure, and not necessarily because they are experiencing greater harm. And live experiences reveal impacts are felt most intensely at the coastline, which is where contamination ends up and where we are seeing these beaches close. And they are not seeing it from an inland perspective where these sewage pipelines originate. And we also know that public awareness is low and information is often failing to reach communities, which creates communication inequity that limits advocacy and protection. And lastly, we can also come to a conclusion that environmental inequity emerges through visibility, reporting gaps, and uneven infrastructure investment rather than a simple rich and poor kind of divide. So ultimately, future work should deepen the analysis of underreported areas, examine communication pathways more closely between the public and county, analyze how far spills travel based on their size and where they occur to essentially predict geographic impacts more effectively, and discover what mitigation efforts could address the inequities that result. In closing, this project helped me see how inequity around sewage spills is shaped by silence, by gaps in information, and by the journey contamination takes through our watersheds and into the beaches and neighborhoods Angelenos care about. We cannot fix what we do not see, and this work has made it clear that our county needs stronger reporting, stronger communication, and stronger investment. By addressing both inland spill hotspots and coastal impact zones, Los Angeles County can move towards a more equitable and healthier future. Thank you so much for listening.